Hello, everyone. I'm Aprajita, a story scholar with the 1947 Partition Archive, and it is my pleasure to be your host today. Welcome to the 75 Days of Partition series. This is day 73 of hosting esteemed guests for this series, and with a couple of days left, it is going to continue till August 17. I would like to tell the viewers that today we are going to host three speakers, one after another. So keep listening to the intensified amount of knowledge being shared with you all today. Our first esteemed guest is Raza Naeem. Let me start by giving a brief bio of him. Raza Naeem is an award winning Pakistani researcher, translator, and dramatic reader based in Lahore. And he has been trained in political economy from the University of Leeds in UK and in Middle Eastern history and anthropology from the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, USA. He has engaged with the Middle East since the last 2 decades now, and he has traveled worldwide. He contributes regularly to various newspapers like The Wire, The Quint, and Outlook in India, and the Friday Times, Dawn, and News on Sunday in Pakistan. He has curated and moderated a first ever edition of Banned Books Week in Pakistan in Lahore in September 2014 and five successive editions since then in collaboration with Olomo Polo. His translation and dramatic reading work has been showcased internationally at the Lucknow and Delhi Literature Festivals in India, both in 2014, and most recently at the Winnipeg International Writers Festival, Canada, in September 2017. And locally at many TEDx, mostly recently at TEDx Lums, Lahore, in April 2018. He is a recipient of many prestigious awards like 2013 to 14 Charles Wallace Trust Fellowship in the UK and many others. He has done a lot of interpretive work on banned Pakistani writer Sadat Hassan Manto's essays, and most recently a runner-up finalist for the inaugural 2017 Jawad Memorial Prize for Urdu English Translation India. He is presently completing a manuscript on Sahih Ludhianvi and Lahore, forthcoming in 2022, to coincide with the 100th birth anniversary of the poet. Welcome, Raza Saab.
Thank you, Aprajita. The pleasure is all mine.
Let me jump straight to my question. So today happens to be the 75th anniversary of Pakistan's independence and Abdullah Hussein's 91st birthday. So it is apt that we discuss about him on this special occasion. Udas Naslein. It is a celebrated work of Abdullah Hussain with a legacy of its own. And then it was translated into English as The Weary Generations by the writer himself. So, can you tell us how is the translated work different from the original novel? And can you also comment upon the backstory that went into writing it?
Thank you very much for having me. Today is actually there's a third reason for to celebrate. Today, my son Ursel turns 11 years old. He's a 14 August baby. Well, a boy now, really. So I would have loved to
Congratulations.
thank you to show him here, but he's probably run off somewhere to celebrate his birthday. But so yeah, I mean, there's a third occasion when the 14 August comes, and often it gets hard to find out what should we celebrate and what we should leave out. Uh, yes, Abdullah Hussain's Very Generations is a very special work, and uh, I think I get a lot of that. But first, before I go on into that about comparing the Urdu and the English versions, many people are under the impression that Abdullah Hussain translated the work. Well, it's not really a faithful translation, it's actually a transcreation. And this is something which really put off many people from the English novel for many, many years. And even now here in South Asia, because one often talks about Abdullah Hussain and the very generations. There is another work of Abdullah Hussain which I have translated. When one discusses Udas Nasleem, many people are not aware that he actually transcreated the work. Now, this distinction is very important for for students of language, because in English and Urdu there are two different versions of the novel. I mean, the Urdu novel is spread over a very, very wide canvas. There are lots of characters. I can't even name them here. We don't even have time to go into all of those characters. I mean, uh, in terms of quantity, maybe both novels are only short of 100 odd pages. The very generations. The novel I have it here. It's about 400 odd pages, while the Urdu version of Das Nasle is about 100 pages more. But even having said that, I mean, the Urdu version also, some people may find it unreadable. It's got a lot of cuss words in Punjabi. In fact, when Abdullah Hussain Saab died in 2015, one of the people who was writing his obituary, he, irrespective of, when we write about a dead person, we usually don't talk about moral things. We remember him. But that literary critic could not help but note that Abdullah Hussain's novel Udas Naslid had a lot of cuss words, which was in bad taste. You normally don't mention these things when someone has passed away, whether it's South Asian culture or it's Muslim culture or what have you. And in fact, it is one of the reasons why the novel was almost on the verge of being banned when Ayub Khan was ruling Pakistan. And this is also what makes me come to the backstory of the novel. The legend is that I mean, Abdullah Hussain was he was trained in chemical engineering from Canada, and he already had literary roots. Although there was no pedigree in his family. So he came back to Pakistan and he was posted in a remote cement factory in Daud Khel, which is now in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The old name of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is the old Northwest Frontier province. So according to him, he had a lot of time to kill. For 8 hours he worked. For 8 hours he just stared at the walls. What to do with the other 8 hours? So he picked up a pen and he started writing a novel, which, according to him, began as a love story. And this is very interesting because maybe there was no social media then in those days. 1960s, no Facebook or Twitter to. Now we have a lot of distractions. I wonder how we can even write novels as big as Rasmussen. But in those times, to spend all those 8 hours, short of staring at walls or doing your work in a remote outpost of NWF, it was a big feat. So, it's very interesting because every other novel of Abdullah Hussain says there's a disclaimer. It's a simple love story, but it is anything but. In Pakistan or India, even to love is to politicize it. Love is also a form of politics, in Pakistan and India, because you can get murdered or killed for loving somebody, and its effects go across generations. So he completed the novel, but then he had a big in Daud Khel, he developed this chest infection and he was convalescing on a hospital bed, and next to him lay this, you know, old Punjabi person, and they got talking, fellow convalescents, and they talked about everything, about love, about politics, about partition. And during the course of that conversation, Abdullah Hussain found out that that person had actually access to a war diary of a soldier who had actually fought in the First World War, and he won the Victoria Cross, for those services. So after he got well, according to Abdullah Hussain, he chased that person on Tonga, on train, on foot, and 2 miles he walked to the village of that person, and he stayed with him for a few days, and he did not rest until he had access to that war diary. And according to Abdullah Hussain, that reading that war diary, and I'm sure this is obviously you can appreciate that at the 1947 partition archives, because those oral history that changed the whole scope of the novel. I mean, from a simple love story, it became a saga spanning generations. So this is basically the backstory, and the rest, of course, is history. How Muhammad Khan became Abdullah Hussain, and how Udas Nasle became the very generations. I mean, the novel is still in print after more than 50 years of publication, which is a big achievement in cultures like ours, where books have a very limited shelf life. You know.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating story you have shared there. And I was actually thinking that, he was actually chasing an oral history while he was pursuing that soldier for, lived memories, to share the lived memories. Also, you are talking about the translation, transcreation, all these things, but also to focus on the title. How does Udas Nasle becomes the weary generation? Does it do justice to what Udas Nasle means, and how does Udas gets converted into weary?
Yes, I'm a translator myself, so I was actually marveling, when I was asked to write the foreword to the HarperCollins reissued edition. I went straight to Abdullah Hussein's daughter Noor Fatma. I call her Appa. She lives in Lahore, very wonderful lady, who is now the literary heir of all of Abdullah Hussein's work. So I also broached her about, about the import of this title, Udas Nasle. And I've hinted at it in my forward as well. I mean, it sounds very romantic, if you look at it in Urdu, but when you translate it to varied generations, it is not very, very romantic. And basically, what he was writing the dirge of a whole generation. I mean, specifically Pakistan, and maybe we can talk about that later. What he meant by this aphorism, which has now become actually a byword for the way business is unfortunately conducted in our country politically, is that Pakistan to Abdullah Hussain, there was no struggle achieved in achieving Pakistan. Pakistan was basically handed over to the landed elite on a plate, and they did not basically struggle for it. The struggle was basically those people who traveled on foot, and in the novel itself, there's this whole journey where Naeem perishes because though they are being cut out by marauders, Sikh marauders, Hindu marauders, and of course many atrocities were done on the other side as well by Muslims. But in the novel, of course, because that was the national narrative, so there was a disconnect between the elite who simply traveled by aeroplane with all their jewels sewn. And in the novel itself, there is also a scene where, Azra, who's well, it's a shame to call her a heroine. She's not really a heroine of the novel, but she's Naeem's love interest. So let's give her some respect. Her family is saying, oh, but how are we going to carry all these jewels on an airplane? And, there was so much that, they ultimately had to leave some and spewed the rest of the jewels. Well, the elite basically, they didn't partake of the trepidations which those foot soldiers literally, who were cut down, many of whom lost their wives, daughters, men. They just hopped on an airplane and they came to Karachi, the capital. So for Abdullah Hussain, for them, there was no struggle. Pakistan was basically achieved on a plate, and they basically stopped struggling after Pakistan was given to these people. These people mean the elite. They stopped struggling after that. So because they had become weary of struggling. And of course, not, Naeem and Nazra both belong to this sad generation, this weary generation. So the word sad didn't capture that. I hope you try to get me. The word sad doesn't try to capture this disconnect between the struggling generations. So even in later years when Abdullah Hussain was asked about the import of this title, he said, well, the generations in Pakistan are getting wearier. They haven't gotten less wary. So this title has actually it's stuck. It's stuck. Even after 75 years. You know, and perhaps you can apply it to India. I mean, or Sri Lanka. Because unfortunately, there's little to celebrate. In the subcontinent as a whole. So yeah. I mean, I hope that tries to explain the import of the title, the very generations.
Yes, that actually does explain it really well. Uh, so Raza Sahab, like you have mentioned a lot of characters, you yourself mentioned that there's a milieu of characters within the story, and the story is working at so many levels. How does the novel succeed in depicting the poetics and politics of the subcontinental history? Thus,
Well, I've argued that politics first. I mentioned that the earlier disclaimer of the novel was that it's a simple love story, but as Naim and Ezra's story tells us, even in the subcontinent, love is a form of politics. And basically, Naim and Ezra, there's a mesalliance between them, because Azra belongs to the family of Roshan Agha, who is the main feudal character in the novel. She belongs to this very crusty feudal family of the subcontinent. While Naim is basically the son of peasants who had basically freed themselves from the clutches of Roshan Agha, the Beg family, and they had become proud. I mean, they were not mazaras, not peasants, but they owned. As Naim's father would not tire of reminding him, uh, they were peasants who had made something of themselves. So Naim basically was part of the prosperous middle class, but ends up throwing his lot with the peasants. So what I have argued is that the novel can be read on three levels. I mean, the novel can be read as a simple love story, between Naim and Azra, you know, which is basically what Abdullah Hussain had also intended when he started writing the novel. Or it can be read as a very faithful description of our struggle, our meaning the struggle waged commonly by Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs against the British. I mean, there are very faithful scenes of Jallianwala Bagh massacre. We were commemorating its century not long ago in 2019. There are scenes about the Rowlatt Act and what it wrought in its wake, the draconian legislation of the British, and the writing which became very commonplace after the Pakistan Resolution of 1940. In the last decade or so, increasing communalization, of subcontinental politics, and of course another massacre which we talk about very less often, which occurred in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or NWFP during Gandhi's Salt March, the Kissa Khwani Bazaar massacre. It's all there, or the Shahid Ganj, the protests over the Shahid Ganj mosque. So, and that is the reason I mean, I've taught at O levels, and I find that a novel is a wonderful tool to teach Pakistan studies, which is the name for standard history, to students, young students, 16, 17, because some of these events are officially excised from Pakistani history, because they don't conform to that idea of a nation state exclusively formed in the name of Islam, where although it was formed as a secular state, I mean, Jinnah, Iqbal, Sir Sayyid wanted a secular state in Pakistan, but for some reason, those events do not conform to this notion. And of course, we can start talking about that in India as well now, which wasn't the case before. Uh, Thirdly, I mean, of course, Abdullah Hussain was a proud Punjabi. So if you're looking for a description of the Punjab, he always wanted to write a Punjabi novel. Unfortunately, fate didn't give him any opportunity. So you can read this novel. I mean, there are some wonderful, evocative passages about the politics and sociology of the Punjab. Some of the rituals which peasants follow, which are probably disappearing now in the countryside in India and Pakistan, perhaps, bullock cart racing, and I mean, especially what happens at harvest time, जिसको हम पौर माघ के महीने कहते हैं पंजाबी में, और जिसको हम मतलब तो ये all these descriptions, there are some very wonderful, and I mean, in English at least you tend to miss that. Uh, so yeah, I mean, so it all comes together for the reader. I mean, you can either be oblivious to one or other aspects of the novel while you read it. I mean, it's hard to be oblivious, because politics dots every page. And yes, I also forgot to tell you, there are some horrible passages about war. What war does to psychologies of soldiers, and how it brings people apart. and how it brings people together. So I think that that novel in English has got some of the finest passages about the barbarism, and I've quoted some of them, one or two passages in my foreword as well. So I mean, yeah, it's a saga. It's a sprawling epic novel. There are many facets to that.
Raza Sahab, of course, it is an epic novel, and like you are mentioning about the how certain cultural terms that were used in Punjab are being depicted there, and how it is missed out while it is being translated or translated into English. But the novel has also been described as myopic by some critics, who say that it does not take Punjab and Punjabi language into its consideration. How do you respond to that?
Frankly speaking, I don't. I find this argument is quite myopic and philistinic in my opinion. I mean, we are not happy with anything. In Pakistan, our Urdu. I mean, look, it's a controversial notion, but if you look at Urdu literature of the 20th century, some of the greatest Urdu literature has been produced by Punjabis who forsook writing in their mother language, and I mean, they've sacrificed for the Urdu language. I don't know how it works for India, but I mean, I think I'm talking reasonably about Punjabis also on the other side of the border. And Abdullah Hussain was one of those. I mean, look at all the others. There's Faiz Ahmed Faiz, there's Iqbal, the National Poet of Pakistan. I mean, there are so many. I mean, Rajinder Singh Bedi, Krishan Chandar, Sadat Hasan Manto. I mean, I could go on. I mean, Noon Meen Rashid. All of these people, they forsook writing in their mother tongue to write in Urdu, and I don't think that is a bad deal. So I find these arguments really unconvincing. I mean, okay, fine. If Abdullah Hussain couldn't write it, you write it. No, you write a Punjabi novel. Should Abdullah Hussain do everything? Should Faz do everything? I mean, they should also write epic novels about the partition, and then they should also go for 20 years in exile, which Abdullah Hussain was, and he was in England. He was managing a pub over there, and he should write 5 or 6 novels and short stories, and then he should also have the time to write in Punjabi. Why don't you go ahead and write a novel in Punjabi, and then we can all celebrate and clap, till the cows come home. So yeah, I mean, I find that argument. I mean, the Punjabi lobby here in Pakistan, the extremists in that lobby, they have a big score to settle with some of these people, because they can't just forgive the fact that some of their own, meaning the Punjabis, they have given Urdu a very enriching literature, which, I mean, literature is literature. It's either good or bad, whether it's Punjabi or Urdu. I mean, who are we to say? So I'm sorry. I think this argument is very myopic. Which says that I mean, let's celebrate this novel for whatever it is. And that's why we have translations, right? I mean, Abdullah Hussain translated this novel at the co- at the at the instigation of UNESCO, because no other person came ahead and translated this novel. Even people are not happy that he translated his own novel. Even, I mean, that's a separate industry. There's a whole industry in this country which says, oh, why did he try? I mean, or why Kuratul and Heather, translated Aag Ka Darya, I mean, so people are not happy in our part of the world. I mean, they don't want to do anything. And then people who do, they want to criticize them just for the sake of, having a name. Well, do something original. My advice to these people is, do something original. I mean, he's been dead all these years now. I mean, it's been like 6, 7 years since he passed away. For God's sake, just forgive him for not writing in Punjabi and all the others by extension. So I'm
Yeah, I've
sorry.
heard the same thing from a certain author who said that when you would be covering oral histories from a particular region, some critics would be there to say, why did suppose you're covering the interviews from Punjab, why didn't you cover it from Bengal? It is myopic, why didn't you include those? So somebody in Bengal would be waiting to cover all those interviews, and it would be more relevant, and they would be able to do more justice to them. So yeah, that's very true what you said there.
And I haven't even mentioned Krishna Sopti, who's a great son of Punjab. She was born in Gujarat, Pakistan. You know, I mean, I wouldn't have discovered her if it had not been for wonderful translations of her work. I mean, one of her translators from Gujarat, Pakistan to Gujarat, India, it is done by that wonderful translator who's just got the Booker Prize, for Geetanjali Shri. She was the one who translated her now. So, I mean, I wonder if they say the same in India about Krishna Sokti, I mean, who is a brilliant writer, but just because she didn't write in Punjabi, I'm not convinced. That doesn't make her a less great writer.
Yes, I agree. Raza Saab also partition, as they say, was like played out on the bodies of women. And can you tell us, how does vary generations depict the plight of women, and how far does it succeed in giving an apt representation of the condition of women in that time?
And I've argued in my, in my foreword that Abdullah Hussain, and this is a problem which is a problem with Abdullah Hussain in, all his novels. His women characters are not very convincing, unfortunately, and because they just do things on the spur of the moment, and or they do things which are not popular with the readers. Even when I was rereading the very generations, I mean, Azra is supposedly is a heroine, but I don't think she really clicks with me. I mean, and that's okay. But I think it's the minor characters in the novel which really appeal to me, and I would like to read out a passage with your permission on one such minor character. Who's a Kumhari. You know, who is a wonderful example of a woman who is reborn later as an Achut woman called Sheila in the same novel. So I would just like to read this. It's a short passage, but it's a very wonderful passage. And this is this. I mean, these are the sort of women which work for me. So I quote. I heard that a Kumhari had given out a call that should there exist a real man in the world, he may come and take her away. My moustache curled up at the sound of this. I found out that the Kumhar, the woman's husband, was a champion wrestler in the area, and his mother used to lock him and his wife in a room and didn't let them out till the morning. So going there at night was out of the question. Thakur Das's voice was halted by flame in his throat. He cleared it and went on. So going there at night was of no use. I sent word through a go between woman that I would be under a peepal tree a half furlong from her village on a certain day at the time that the sun begins to slip from overhead. And if she were a woman of her word, she may come out and meet me. That day I waited under the tree for an hour, and she didn't come. I fell asleep from the heat of the sun. I was woken by the point of a stick being poked in my belly. I opened my eyes and saw a young man standing there. What do you want? I asked. You send a message with pride and then you shut your eyes. Shame on you. It is not a man who sleeps as he awaits a woman, said the young man. Except that it was no young man, it was her in disguise. We started off together from there and spent the night at a friend's house in another village. In the morning, she says, marry me. I promised to do so just to silence her and took her to Amritsar. There I sold her to a customer for 100 silver rupees and escaped from there in the dark of the night. That was that, I thought. But no, I was sleeping in my own house a few days later when I was woken up again. Can you believe it? Woken up from deep sleep twice in a row by the same woman. This time she was sitting on my chest with a dagger in her hand. Akura stopped. What happened then? Naeem asked. What do you think? Could you say no with a knife at your throat? You married her? We have been married for 14 years. Confused, Naeem blurted out the question. But why? Why what? She had a husband, strong, a wrestler. I mean, he ran out of words. Yes, Hakusta said, himself confused, as if he did not understand what the question was about. In another shop, a soldier began to sing in a low, dry voice a song of bereavement and departure. Naim threw the corn stalks from underneath him onto the nearest sleeping soldiers and went back to his bed. Thakur Das followed him. I know of women, he said, who have 6 babies with one man and then run off with another. Surindari got me at the point of a knife, got the Pandit at the point of a knife to marry us. You know, the two of us were on horseback, and the Pandit, trembling with fear, led the horse by the reins and took us through the rounds. Aha! But listen, since that day, she has not raised her voice to me. She misses me. I know it here. Thakurdas patted his chest. Here. She speaks to me here. Patted his chest again. I am going to sleep. Naim said, covering his face with the blanket. End quote. So this Kumhari is a she makes an appearance for just barely 1.5 page. But of all the sprawling pages which the main heroine Azra is dotting, I find people like this Kumhari Surindri much more convincing. You know, because even the upper classes in Pakistan have changed now. I mean, they're probably far away from being politicized. I mean, Azra, unfortunately, she marries out of love, and there are things going for her, but unfortunately, that relationship never really consummates, because it's a mismatch. I mean, the class interests of Azra are totally different from Naeem's class interest, and basically, it's about class. There's a strong thread of class running throughout Abdullah Hussain's novels, not just this one. Everyone speaks for his class, and that's what Marx said as well. So Azra spoke to her class, her loyalties lay. She made that journey by plane to Pakistan. Naim, unfortunately, did not make that journey to Pakistan. He perished while making the journey on foot. We are only allowed a scream for Naim. We don't know where he disappears, but he perishes. So yeah, I mean the woman characters. I mean this is the problem. Either they're in Abdullah Hussein's novels, either they're very unconvincing, or I think there are other characters who are minor characters or written out as minor, but who are far more convincing and powerful than the main character of Abdullah Hussein's novels.
Reza Saab, that was a very wonderful reading, and we would really, would like to listen to more of what you would like to read from the very generations that depicts what it is really about. That would be nice if you could read more.
Yes, this is a passage about war. I think I said earlier that if you want to read a description of how war changes, you know, people, especially people who've been forced to fight, who don't want to fight. I mean, that is unfortunately what war is about. The ugliness and brutality of war. I mean, Eugene V. Debs, who was a very famous American socialist, presidential candidate in early 20th century America, he was jailed for saying this, that the subordinate classes fight the war and the ruling classes make them. He was correct. So this passage, this is a dialogue between Naim, who's the main character. I mean, one reason why I like Naim is because he's half of my own name. So that's one of the reasons I like him. He is having this dialogue with his childhood friend Mahinder Singh, who has also been conscripted for World War I. Let me read it out to you. I quote, "That was different," he said after a few minutes. "To avenge the blood of one of your own, even a rat can kill. Here, we don't even know the people. It is like killing a pig or a jackal in the jungle." "Well," Naim said, "that is what war is." Although supporting his weight on hands placed on either side of him on the stone, Mahinder Singh looked slumped, his back in the shape of a bow, his shoulders fallen, as if his body had taken on a different form. "Tell me," Mahinder Singh asked suddenly, "why are we here?" Because of the war, said Naeem. The enemy has attacked. What? Attacked our village? Attacked the British Sarkar and their friends. What is it to us? They are our masters. Our master is Roshan Agha, Mahinder Singh said simply. Yes, and the English Sarkar is Roshan Agha's master. A brief hollow sound emerged from Mahinder Singh's mouth. How many masters do we have? Naeem laughed. Well, that's just the way it is. Mahinder Singh got up ponderously, as if making an effort to carry the weight of his clothes. I like this place, he said, gesturing towards the graves. Here, good people are buried with names. End quote. So, another passage is about, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. I think if you want to read any novel about the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. There are other novels which have been written. Salman Rushdie, who's unfortunately he's recovering from what that unfortunate thing which happened with him. His novel Midnight's Children talks about. He talks about it in a magical realist style. There's a doctor who gets transported right in the heat of the bath. Then there is, Charles Raj's Raj Quartet. But those novels were written much later after Udasanas. Here in this novel, as I will try to show you, when you read, your spines are tingling. You feel that you're actually inside that bar as the bullets are being fired. I'm going to read this out to you. I quote, nobody had so far looked around them along the walls. Suddenly, the heads of soldiers appeared above the walls on all sides as if from nowhere. They started shooting. For a moment, we did not know what was happening, although we felt that something was definitely on because the noise of the people stopped. In the silence, the rat tat tat of bullets was coming from all three sides. Within moments, we became aware of people being hit and bleeding and falling, and then we were running, except that there was nowhere to run. We were all packed against each other like fishes in the net as it is pulled up, and like fishes we were wriggling. But whichever way we turned, we saw only other men. I imagine that is what fishes see as they wriggle in the heat of the hold of the net. Other fishes. There was movement in the crowd, but it was going in circles like eddies in a river. It was a river of heads and bodies turning and doubling back on itself, and still the bullets kept coming. As luck would have it, man after man started falling, making room for others to run over him, and some who were weak, although not even hit by a bullet, fell in the crush and died under the feet of running men. I am small, but I am quick. My smallness worked to my advantage, so I could slip through other men's holes without falling. Near the opening in the wall, which is the only exit, as you see, there is a well. It is a dry well, but deep. I saw that people were so blinded by the bullets which chased them that they were running and falling into the well, and others were falling on top of them. There were rumors afterwards that the well was half filled up by the men who could not get out of it, but who wanted to wait and confirm it at the time. I made good my escape, but no, sir, I tell you, it was no escape. We were all running until we came to the bazaar, and there was another scene going on there. This was the spot where the gory woman had been attacked 2 days before, on that stretch of 20 yards. There were soldiers with rifles taking straight aim, and everyone who came there had to drop face down and crawl. Not on their elbows and knees either. No, sir, on their bellies like lizards. There I saw another river of men squirming and slithering like a herd of pythons, with their heads buried in the earth and faces bleeding in attempts to crawl, for which they were not trained. But they were in fear of their lives because whenever a head was raised, a bullet came a hand's width above it. The crawlers had great difficulty. Not me though. I was only 3 when my father threw me in the river and taught me how to lie on it face down without moving a limb or sinking. So I was familiar with the job and the fastest to get through the crawl. Only this little bit of difficulty on my back was higher than other backs, and bullets passed 2 fingers above it, but did no harm to my progress. The crawling of men did not stop that day, but went on for many days after, until people stopped going that side, and still the soldiers went to other bazaars and drove the people ahead of them with rifle butts to this place and then forced to crawl through it. Many days. O children, what do you know about how this rebel city was punished? End quote. So this is the second part of this passage was the Rowlatt Act, those draconian legislation which Justice S.I.T. Rowlatt, put in place after the Jallianwala Bagh, where, people actually had to crawl to reach from one end of the street to the other. This was that famous street in Amritsar where that Gori woman was assaulted, by the people who were protesting. So yeah, I mean, the novel is dotted with such passages, which really put your spines on notice. And I mean, you feel as if you're actually in the middle of the action, and you want to maybe just put the book down for a while and just get a sense of where you are. Get a sense of your bearings. You may pinch yourself just to see that you're not sitting in Amritsar, of 1919. And it's a very spine tingling description. And as I mentioned, there are such passages throughout the novel, including the description, by the way, of the Kissa Khwani Bazar massacre of 1930, which again was how Abdul Ghaffar Khan, the frontier Gandhi, his Khudai Khidmat guards were punished because for them even to do this in front of a hail of bullets was not allowed. They were devotees of Gandhi, non-violence. For them, non-violence meant, even if you did this to stop the bullets, that was a sign that you're being violent.
Yeah. So that's really a very, harrowing incident you have just described there from Abdullah Hussein's novel. And I'm sure he has described a lot of such scenes, right? Um, you have also worked a great deal on Manto, and he's also known for giving very, descriptive accounts of, various snippets of incidents, how he describes them like they're photographs, right? The photographs of violence, photographs of, even on the verge of being called obscene by the critics, right? So how do you, compare the works of these two writers, Abdullah Hussain and Sadat Hussain Manto?
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, it's almost been a decade since I've been translating Manto. I've just sent off another translation of an essay by him on the male gaze, how he how the males view prostitutes. I mean, that essay, extracts of it are going to be published in a volume coming out from Oxford University Press here in Karachi, and probably at the end of the year. It's called Bazaar, and it's illustrated with brilliant photographs of courtesans. So Manto, yeah, I mean, Manto was born in Amritsar, the rebel city, and I've actually written about how the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, it affected him. I mean, he was actually a witness to the massacre, and he's written 6 stories about the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. One of his most famous stories talks about a courtesan, 1942 की एक बात, 1919 की एक बात, where it is a courtesan, a pimp, Hushia, who takes the bullet. The first bullet which was fired against the rebels, according to Manto, was Hushia the pimp. And that borrows from this myth, Maupassant, the great French writer. He wrote, there's this myth that in the French Revolution, the first bullet fired was taken by a prostitute. So Manto, who was a big admirer of Maupassant, he takes that myth forward. So I think the similarities between Abdullah Hussain and Manto, of course, they were not contemporaries. Manto was born in 1912, and Abdullah Hussain was born 20 odd years afterwards. Was they were both realists. I mean, they both belong to the progressive camp. Anjuman Taraqi Musannifin, as it's called, and it's a very one of the old distinguished organizations which had an all India platform in 1936. It was Munshi Premchand who gave the opening address of the founding conference of the Anjuman Taraqi Musannifin in Lucknow. But Abdullah Hussain is also an anti-Marxist. But Manto, who was under Marxism for a very, very long time, he broke away from Marxism, but he was never against Marxism. That is the major difference between both Abdullah Hussain and Manto. Both right from a realist perspective. There is a lot of both for political people, very political people. I mean, it is. I mean, I have worked on Manto's essays, for example. If you read the essays and not the stories, you will find out that Manto. I mean, many people give this argument that Manto was just a great storyteller per se, like Mopson. He was not. I think that's a nonsense argument. Manto's politics is. I mean, do you have to join a political party or an Anjuman to be to be a political? No. So both Manto and Abdullah Hussain, I mean, they did not join political parties, but both were very much political. And when you take the side of the underprivileged, as Manto and Abdullah Hussain did, you are political. I mean, Manto and Abdullah Hussain talked about. I mean, Manto has talked a lot about prostitutes, about pimps, about classes of people who are shorn from bourgeois society. And Abdullah Hussain, even in Das Nasli, he's talked about Madan, one of his characters who does not make an appearance in the very generation is Madan, who's from the Achut community. Remember, this was the community who later on Gandhi, he used the word Harijans, and later on Harijan, and afterwards they are now scheduled castes. Sheila, who who makes an appearance in the very generations, and later as Bano in the concluding pages of the very generations also is a Madan sister. She belongs to the Achut community. So what I'm trying to say is that both Manto and Abdullah Hussain were very much political, and in fact Abdullah Hussain, his novels are not just love stories. I mean, he's taken big grand themes. His novel Nadar Log, for example, is about the tragedy of 1971. What happened when one half of Pakistan separated itself, and the continent was partitioned for a second time. When Bangladesh got independent. His novel Bagh is about Kashmir. When the Operation Blue Star was launched in 1965 without the knowledge of the Indians. When this group during the 1965 war. So all of his novels are very much political. So this is, I think, one of the similarities which place Abdullah Hussain in conversation with Manto. And of course, both were proud Punjabis. They spoke in Punjabi at home, which is one of the things which none of the two films on Manto, I'm sorry to say, capture. They don't describe him talking in Punjabi. I mean, neither of them spoke in chaste Urdu at home. They wrote in Urdu, but their mother tongue was Punjabi. They were proud of that.
Thank you for sharing such insightful thoughts on Abdullah Hussain and then subsequently Manto as well. It has been a great pleasure talking to you today, Raza Sahab, and your dramatic readings of the book, The Very Generations, has been a great glimpse into what Very Generations is about. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prajita, and thank you to the 1947 Partition Archives for giving us this opportunity to remember the horrors of partition on the 75th anniversary of Pakistan's Independence Day and on the 91st anniversary of Abdullah Hussain, the great creator of this amazing novel. And I hope that more people will, because I don't think the novel Udas Naste has been translated into Hindi yet. So I hope that more people will be, they will be motivated to perhaps translate the novel into Hindi, or really read the novel in the English version, The Very Generations, which has never been out of print. And again, this novel, this is the 2016 edition. There is also a 2019 edition, which comes in a very beautiful cover from Harper Perennial Classics. So I hope more people will be, more young people actually, will be motivated to discover the joys and the tribulations of the very generations, and see how it speaks to them even in the 75th year of the partition of India.
That's a great suggestion to end our conversation with. Those who are joining us, please stay online and hear other speakers. Dr. Tarunjit Singh Butalia and Ehsan Khan. We will be back online in few minutes. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Azeem Khan, story scholar and at the 1947 Partition Archive and a South Asian Studies lecturer. And it is my pleasure to be your host today. Welcome to the 75 Days of Partition series. This is day 73 of hosting esteemed guests, which will continue till August 17th. Today, we are starting the long R series till the 17th, so keep tuning in. It is an honor to welcome Dr. Tarunjit Singh Butalia. How are you, Doctor?
Thank you very much. Thank you, my brother Azeem Khan. I hear that you have gone to the same college as my father, my grandfather, and my great grandfather in Lahore. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I went to Ehsan College, as you mentioned in your writing as well. You would have been an HSonian, where you was Punjab not partitioned.
That is correct. I even threatened my son, who's a teenager, that if he doesn't behave, I can get admission for him at Atchison College.
I mean, it would be nice for him. He would like it.
Yes.
And how are you today, sir?
I am doing very well. Thank you so much. It is bittersweet for many of us. There are many of us who are celebrating the independence of India and Pakistan, and I think they should do so. But at the same time, there are many of us who mourn the partition of our homeland, who would celebrate on a day when your ancestors had to leave everything they had accumulated, everything that they had done. So I think this is a bittersweet moment for the entire South Asian community.
Uh, ex- Definitely, definitely. I completely agree with that. And before we move to the questions, I would just like to give a brief bio of yours. Um, Dr. Tarunjit Singh Butalia currently serves as the Executive Director of Religions for Peace USA. He has been a servant leader in the interfaith movement for over 2 decades. He has been a member of the Board of Trustees of Parliament of the World's Religions for 12 years, as well as the North American Interfaith Network. He is also a founding trustee of the Sikh Council for Interfaith Relations and serves on the advisory committee of the Global Sikh Council. He is a former advisory board member of the Journal of Interreligious Studies. He has also served on the board of the National Religious Coalition Against Torture, as well as the World Sikh Council in the region of America. In 2016, he was awarded Luminosa Award for Unity by Foculaire Movement, and in 2020, he was honored by the National Council of Churches in the USA with its 2020 Gwyn Gilbert Award for Excellence in Interreligious Leadership. Locally, he has worked with Interfaith Association for Central Ohio for over 20 years and is co-editor of the landmark Ohio bicentennial book, Religion in Ohio, Profiles of Faith Communities. In 2021, he published the book My Journey Home, Going Back to Lehnda, Punjab, based on a visit to his ancestral home in Pakistan more than 70 years after his grandparents left in the year 1947. Welcome again, Dr. Saab.
Thank
It is again our pleasure to have you here, and I can't wait to get stuck into the questions.
thank
Um,
you.
Firstly, Dr. Batalia, let's start with your family partition journey, and following that, please detail your journey to Lahore and West Punjab. And I will openly admit I welled up a little while reading the beautiful words you wrote about your trip here. Um, s- and the wonderful experiences you had in Pakistan, especially in my city of Lahore. Please regale us with all your stories from your trip.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that 1947 Archive is doing the 75 series on the 75th anniversary, lifting up the joys and pains of the partition. My family had lived in the village of Butala, which is near Gujranwala, for at least, I would say, that I'm aware of about 5 or 6 generations, and had 42 villages there. during Maharaja Ranjit Singh's time, and that is why the family name was KG Punjabi, which they say 42 is Batali. So, ji, we are going to these people who have 42 Jagirs or Batali. That is how my last name still is Butalia. The village Butala, my Dada Dadiji and two of my uncles. One uncle was only 2.5 months old, the other was 2.5 years old. The four of them were in the ancestral home in the Butala village when the partition happened. My father, who at that time was in Atchison College, had already been moved to his Nana and Naniji in Firozpur, and his two brothers were there with him. My grandparents were assured by the villagers, and all these stories that I'm sharing with you, Azeem, were all told to me by my grandmother. So I have these vivid memories of my grandma telling me these things again and again and again. So it's kind of ingrained into my mind, but I only remember, I would say, about 20% what she's told me, because it's been more than 30 years since I came to the US, and much longer than that she has passed away. So she said, the villagers assured us, they were the big sardars of the village, that, you can stay here. However, some outside mobs came and burnt the back of our ancestral Haveli. And as a result, the villagers said, we can't do your safekeeping anymore. So it might be best for you to go away for some time. And most people thought that they were simply going to go away. And after a month or two, they were going to be coming back. So my grandma said that she put all her stuff together. My Dadaji wore a round turban, which was more of a Muslim style of turban. My Dadiji wore a burqa. My Dadaji's name was Ajit Singh Butalia, and my Dadaji's name was Narendra Kaur. And took one of my chacha, who was 2.5 years old, on a donkey, and took my other chacha into her arms. And as they were about to walk out of the Haveli, my Dadaji said that there was a young man about 15 or 16 years old who stepped up and said, okay, you can go, but you can't take anything with you. And this was a boy whose mother and grandfather had worked for our family. At that time, you had servants that were generational. So I remember my grandmother saying to me at that time that that was the very moment she said she realized she was never coming back. I remember I once asked her, I said, Dadiji, don't you ever feel animosity or anger towards this person who pretty much dispossessed you of all your possessions before you left our ancestral home? And her response was absolutely amazing. She said, Beta, at least they let us live. There were millions who did not live. He said, at least that person gave us the gift of life. So the glass can be half full, the glass can be half empty, but she always saw the glass of compassion as being half full. They then trekked on foot all the way up to Gujranwala, where there was a refugee camp there. And my Dadaji had served in the British Army. He had been with Musa Khan, who is a former army chief of Pakistan. He and Musa Khan were buddies together in IM at Dehradun. So when my Dadaji went to the refugee camp, he wrote his name down as Captain Ajit Singh Butalia, retired. And there was a British officer there who saw that and called him and said, oh, I see that you served in the British Army. Let me try to help you to get you across, you and your family. And my Dadaji declined that. He said that I have a dear friend in Lahore. All that I would like to do is get to him, and he will get me across, or we'll stay with him for a month or two, and then we'll go back to our village. And so this Englishman officer asked a bodyguard to go in a jeep with my grandparents and my two chachas to drop them in Lahore. As they had just got out of Gujranwala, they were stopped by a mob who clearly recognized there was a Sikh family in the jeep, and there was only one gunman who was also the driver who was taking them. And the mob demanded that the Sikh family be handed over to them. And brother, as that happened, now remember, this is Gujranwala. My ancestors know a lot of people there. My grandfather recognized one or two people from among the mob, and he called them out by name. And as soon as they heard that, they stepped up and said, Sardarji, how are you here? And he said that we are trying to get to Lahore. So they said, okay, here's what we'll do is I will come with you and some of the people in the jeep, and we will go and make sure that we drop you in with your friend in Lahore. So here are people who came to attack you. Yet there is goodness even in evil. The world runs because there is more goodness compared to evil. So they took them to Lahore, stayed with his friend there, and I'm sure that my grandma would have told me the name of the family they stayed with. But there were only two things I remember, that's all. One is that the gentleman was in some sort of army or police department, and the second is his wife's name was Amna. And the reason why I think I remember Amna Bibi name is because Amna Bibi Madadi said what she would do is because one of my uncle was only 2.5 months old. And those who have gone through the partition know that that summer was absolutely horrendous. Not in just in terms of tragedy, but in terms of how hot and humid it was at that time. So at night when my chacha used to get up, Amna Bibi used to pick him up and she used to quiet him down, put him down to sleep. When my Dadaji's friend would go to the bazaar to get chicken, or murgi as Punjabis would say to cook, he would get two. Knowing that my grandparents did not eat halal, it is a way that we honor and respect each other. One day, my Dadaji's friend, who he was not very religious in the sense, and Azeem, you are probably aware that there are many Muslims in Pakistan, as you might be aware, who don't pray 5 times a day, but they generally go on Jummah or on Friday, will go to the mosque. So he was that kind of a person. So on a Friday, he went to the mosque and the Imam pulled him aside and said, I'd like to talk to you after the prayers are done. So afterwards, he asked and he says, I understand that you have a visiting family with you. Who is that? And my Dadaji's friend said, this is my brother and his family. The mullah went on to ask my grandfather's friend to swear upon the Quran. And so he did swear upon the Quran that his brother and his family were living with him. Who the hell am I after 75 years to say he took a false oath on the Quran? He truly believed, at great personal peril to himself and his family, that my grandfather was like his brother. That is why he gave them refuge. And after staying there for about another couple of weeks, by now you can imagine, Azeem, that I am now talking about it's already October, mid-October towards late October. My Dadiji's Nanaji, Jaswant Singh Sodhi and Guru or Sahai and his family, where my other three chachas, including my father, were, they assumed that these three people had perished. So they did all the last rites that you did were all done for them. So when they went back, they were obviously overjoyed with tears. But here was a Muslim family that gave new life to my grandparents. And I can never, ever forget that. They talk about, brother, that there are angels who walk in the heavens. No, angels walk on this earth. And this family, indeed for us, were angels on this earth. And these stories, brother, are not just unique to my family. There are thousands and hundreds of such stories that have happened on both sides. And so we need to lift up these stories of compassion, of unconditional love, of friendship, and show that mirror along with the stories that we hear of hatred, of rape of women, merciless killings. Thank you.
Like you said, Dr. Saab, I think the importance of organizations like the Archive and other archives and other people who are bringing forth these stories is exactly like you mentioned. There's a dichotomy between the state narrative and collective memory and people's interpersonal narratives, like your grandparents told you. It was much more complex than just an existential rivalry between different communities. And um, in that vein, please tell us about your experiences in Lahore and the love you got there and how people treated you, and also how you felt retracing the footsteps of your family, not just before partition, but also where you went to your Baba Farid Ganj and
Right.
those places where your family used to be 700 years ago.
Thank you. The first time I went to Pakistan, or what I would call Lenda Punjab, those of us who are Punjabi, the word Charda and Lenda, Charda means where the sun rises, or Charda, and Lenda Punjab is where the sun comes down. So we Punjabis refer to Charda and Lenda Punjab. And Punjab is still one, but just like our heart has several parts, I look at the entire Punjab as one heart with different parts to it. And so when I first time, I've lived in the US for over 30 years. I always wanted to go back. And an opportunity came when there was a conference at UET Lahore. And I, by the way, graduated from Punjab Union College, Chandigarh. That was a part of UET Lahore before 1947. I was there for 12 days. And you can, it's like a kid in a candy store. I write in the book that I wrote, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is that as I was about to land in Lahore, there were a bunch of kids who were going on vacation in December of 2019 also. But I think I was more excited than even those little kids. And so, I arrived into Lahore. And first of all, there is no woman at the airport wearing a burqa. Having been born and brought up in India and then living in the US 30 years, the media tells you that all Pakistanis are very conservative and you force your woman to wear a burqa from head to tail. So I'm like, where are they hiding all these burqa women? And then I realized, yeah, there are some, but the vast majority of women in Lahore and Punjab don't wear a burqa. So that was my first eye opening. Second, brother, is that I stayed at Avari Hotel. So a taxi had come and I got into a taxi. And as soon as I entered into Lahore, Kent, this huge road opened up. And immediately I knew this was Mall Road. And I'm talking about a time about 4 o'clock in the morning. So I am going down this Mall Road and I look on my right hand side. And guess what I see? I see a board of the school that you went to, Atchison College. I could not hold my tears. Now, this is something I was prepared to go to Atchison, knowing that my father, grandfather, and great grandfather went there. But I was not prepared that within the first half hour or an hour of landing in Lahore, suddenly this would hit me in the face all of a sudden. The people of Lahore, oh my God, I cannot pay any money to any shopkeeper. Uber drivers may get me for free. If it was up to them, they would lift me up on their shoulders, bodhiyan te chukke, and would not even let me walk on the floor. One of my most memorable things I did on that trip was a visit to Pakpatan. The reason I say that, as you said, Azeem, is the oldest recollection in our family, which actually is documented in history books, including Punjab Chiefs by Lepel Griffin, is my oldest ancestor that I know is Rai Pagmal. He went from Pakpatan, he spoke Multani or Saraiki, and it is very sweet revenge on me. Azeem, you probably know that we Punjabis seem to make fun of Saraiki or Multani. And it was quite interesting for me to figure out that, my own ancestors, also spoke probably Saraiki and Multani. And so he went to Pakpatan in 1255 AD when Baba Farid himself was alive. And he did a 2-year, what we call Pandara or Langar today. And so Baba Farid blessed him with the title of Pandari at that time. And that title continued with the family till the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Now, going back to the same place in Pakpatan where my grandparents went, my ancestor Rai Pagmal went, how can one describe that in any what way in words? So if there is time, brother, I would like to share a very brief poem, if I can find it in my book, which I would like to share with you all here. Here we go. So, what I decided was when I came back to my hotel room that day after going to Pakpatan and eating langar in the same place where Rai Pagmal served it over 763 years ago at that time, I came back and wrote this poem. This poem is in Punjabi Saraiki, but I will also share an English translation after I speak the original. Multani Rai Pagmal di rooh nu puchsaं, Ganje Shakkar de langar da tu ki kamae sa? Ask the soul of Rai Pagmal of Multan, what did you earn from the langar of Ganje Shakkar? This is the conversation I am having with my ancestor as I am on my way to Pakpatan. जवाब मिलिया भंडारी दा खिताब दवाया जो पाकपतन दे पीर ने निभाया. Answer came, I earned the title of Bhandari, which was bestowed by the Peer of Pakpatan. Now, 763 ਸਾਲ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਵਾਬ ਫੇਰ ਮਿਲ ਸਾਂ ਜਦ ਮੈਂ ਗੰਜਰ ਸ਼ੱਕਰ ਦੇ ਲੰਗਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਈ ਸਾਂ. After 763 years, the answer came again. So I'm now having a conversation with my ancestor Rai Pagmal when I get there. When I visited the langar of Ganje Shakkar. And what does he say to me now? He says, Oy angele mundiya, dil khol ke nivas naal khasa. This word nivas here has two meanings. One meaning is that, as some of you might know, nivas means eat openly and fill your tummy up or eat fully. The word that I have used here, nivas, does not have that meaning. My friend Jahandad Khan, who went with me, his driver's name was Nivas. And when it was time to eat at the langar, they were short of plates. So they gave Nivas and me both a plate from which we both had to eat together. And many of us on both sides of Punjab are aware that there is a prejudice that we don't eat from the same plate with a person of another faith tradition. This time I did. ਓਏ ਅਣਗਹਿਲੇ ਮੁੰਡਿਆ ਦਿਲ ਖੋਲ ਕੇ ਨਿਵਾਸ ਨਾਲ ਖਾਸਾਂ ਇਹ ਰੱਬ ਦਾ ਤੁੱਤ ਭੰਡਾਰ ਹੋਸਾਂ. Oh irresponsible boy, eat your heart out with nivas. This is the never-ending kitchen of God. And then finally he said, ਇਹ ਭੰਡਾਰਾ ਦਾਲ ਰੋਟੀ ਦਾ ਨਾ ਹੋਸਾਂ. This is not the kitchen of lentils and bread. ਦਿਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਿਆਰ ਵਧਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਹੋਸਾਂ, but that of sharing love from the heart. So that is my expression of the visit to where my ancestors were. And so, brother, when I came back to the US, I remember when I was in Pakistan, after about the second or third day, I just went crazy. There was just too much to process. Because, first of all, it is a place where Guru Nanak Sahib was born. He lived most of his life there. He made all these trips, but where did he live? He lived there, going to Kartarpur Sahib, then the history of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And in my case, it was a triple whammy because my own family's ancestral history is so well known. My ancestors were working with Maharaja Ranjit Singh's grandfather and continued till Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So I remember one day I met Jahandad Khan, third or fourth, and he said, "What's wrong with you, Tarunjit?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You just look like you were ready to explode." I said, "That's right." He says, he gave me a good piece of advice. He said, "Don't process now." He says, just become numb and go back. When you are back in the US, go back and process. So when I came back to the US is when I would write one chapter each of this book, my journey home, going back to Landa, Punjab. And I have two friends now, dear friends. At that time, I didn't know Shamukhi, but they translated it. And the translators are my dear friend, Dr. Mazhar Abbas from Government College, Lailpur, and from FC College, Lahore, Khidr Jawad. So when this book was published, it had always Azeem, to me, had been a desire to find out the family who had given refuge to my grandparents. I had almost given up. I could have never imagined that after 75 years, I would be able to find that family. But let me tell you, dreams do come true as long as we work towards them. Kartarpur Sahib was a dream. I never thought that we, India and Pakistan, would ever be able to bring Kartarpur Sahib to a reality, at least in my generation. But it happened. So I think we have to dream of a better future and then we work towards it. So I remember when this book was published, I am here at Pilak, which is a Punjabi literacy center and language center in Lahore. Azeem, I'm sure you know that place. And at the book opening ceremony, and Professor Kalyan Singh, who is a professor of Punjabi, at Government College Lahore comes up to me on the stage and says that I know which family gave refuge to your grandparents.
Wow.
And I'm sitting on a stage at the opening ceremony, you know? So I'm like, what? He says, my first appointment was at Islamia College in Gujranwala. This was Guru Nanak College, which my ancestors helped to build. And there is, in fact, a plaque to our family that still exists at Islamia College. It was Guru Nanak Khalsa College at the time. He says, I did lots of research there about 10, 15 years ago. He already knew the story of the swearing upon the Quran and knew my grandfather's name. And I said, how did you come to know? He had interviewed several servants of our family. As you know, old Sikh Sardars at that time, they owned a home in the village, but they also had one in the city. And our home in the city was very close and catty corner from the clock tower in Gujranwala. And so I said, then who is it? He said his name was Bashir Ahmed Virk, and he said he passed away a long time ago, but his son, Mahmood Bashir Virk, is in Gujranwala, and he's the current MNA, or the member of the National Assembly, and his father is the one who gave refuge to your grandparents. And by now I had goosebumps. I could not wait, you know, to get in touch with Mahmood Bashir Virk, who also, by the way, has been a former law and justice minister for Pakistan. So I called up his office. I set up a time, and a friend of mine, Salman Kamar, who also is from Gujranwala, and myself showed up at his office at the Kacheri or the court in Gujranwala. And an old lanky man, we went in to see him, and we did some sweet talk first. And for a long time, we didn't talk about why I was there. And so I think he was waiting for me to speak, and I was waiting for him to open the door. So after about a half hour, the tension in the room was pretty high. And my friend Salman Kamar, in fact, recorded this entire conversation that happened. But I have a recording, but I have never gone back and seen it again. I'll tell you why in a moment. So, then I presented him a copy of my book, and I told him that I came to know that your father and mother had given refuge to my grandparents and two chachas in 1947. And he right away said that my father never told me so. He said I was very close to my father, but he never ever said this to me. I said, okay. And he said, what is my father's name? I said, I have no idea because I was told this by Kalyan Singh. I said, my grandmother would have told me so, but I do not remember it. I said, what I do remember is that he was in some. Well, I said, first of all, where were you and him during partition, 47? He said, my father and mother were indeed in Lahore, but I was in Ibn Wali, which is a village, and he very fondly talked about how at night they would take Hindus and Sikhs from Ibn Wali, his grandfather and him in trucks, and take them across to Charda, Punjab. And then he then went to talk about two Sikh children who by mistake were left back. That he said that they were brought home by his father. They stayed with them for 3 weeks, and he said we became such good friends. And this 80 or 85-year-old man, his eyes lighted up. He was there. He was back. Okay? He remembered even the small hill on which the children had to go so they could be picked up. His grandparents and the adults were not allowed to go because they could be shot at. So he and some of his other young family members were the ones who went to drop off these children. He still remembers them very, very fondly. So then I said, okay. I said, what I remember is that they were in the army or police. And he said, that is quite possible. Because he said, my father was in the taxation department that at that time was affiliated with the police department. So I said, okay. And then he said, how are you so sure that it was my parents? I said, absolutely, I'm not sure. He said, you don't know my father's name? I said, however, I said, I do remember his wife's name. And he said, what was her name? I said, Amna Bibi. And he said, say that again and louder. By now, he had pulled me very close to him, next to his chair. I was sitting in a chair also. And then I said loudly, Amna Bibi. And after about a minute, there were tears down his eyes. He said, yes, that was my mother's name also. There are
Wow.
certain times when pain of the mouth stops and starts to come as tears from the eyes. So that is one day and the moment when I put my head in his lap and cried as I have never done. It was a crying of pain, a crying of gratitude, but never a crying of thanks. There are certain things in life we can never thank, but we can be full of gratitude for those and lift up the ideals they went through. That particular recording, Azim Bhai, is still there. That is a moment I would never want to live again. And so I'm almost at the point where I want to delete the recording so I don't ever see it again. So that day, I made a promise to him that I would like to go and visit the graves of his father and his mother. And he promised me he would accompany me on that. So when I went back this last December, we met up in Ibn Wali and we went to both the graves of his father and his mother. And at both the graves, I knelt down. And if would it be possible for me to share a picture, I think that might help the audience. If I can have permission to share my screen, I would like to put that up
Yes,
there.
for sure. Yes, if
Thank
you can share your screen, of course.
you. Here we go. Share screen. Okay. Can you see my screen right now?
Not right now.
How about now? Can you see my screen? The picture?
No, I can't.
Okay, let me go back here again. I will try one more time. Let's see. If not, I'll just talk. So yeah, I don't. Oh, here we go. No, I see what is going on here. So let me just bring that up here. Okay, now you should be. I'm already putting the picture up. Do you see the picture now?
I don't think so. Yes, now we can.
On to my left, to my right is Mahmoud Bashir Work. This is his younger
Sorry,
brother.
Dr. Saab, the screen wasn't shared. Some other screen was shared. I think it might not be possible right now.
Let's leave that. Let's talk. Okay.
Okay.
And so when I was there, what I did was knelt down and kissed the grave from the side of the feet. I did it at both places. And as I said, I kissed that. And the dua or the prayer that I made was that may every person in the world be as compassionate and as loving as Bashir Ahmed Work and as Amna Bibi. It was quite interesting. When I came back to Lahore, I was interviewed at BBC, and the BBC, before the interview began, said, oh, so you had gone there to give thanks. I said, absolutely not. I said, I had no business there going and giving thanks. As I said, some things in life you cannot be thankful for. But what you do instead is make a pledge to live those values yourself and also ask others also be able to live by the same standards. When this photo went on social media, there was an interesting pushback. As Azim, you are aware that in Islam, bowing and praying, especially bowing at or sajda at graves is not permitted, and the same is in the Sikh faith. So my picture in which I was kissing the grave from the feet side went viral, and I had lots and lots of upset people. My Muslim friends were upset that I was doing sajda, and my Sikh friends were upset I was doing matha tekna at a grave. What I told them was that I was kissing the grave. Okay, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If they think that I was in sajda or matha tekna, that is their problem. I was there to offer gratitude to two angels that walked this earth who saved my family. And such stories have been repeated all across Punjab on both sides. Some of us have been able to find those angels. And those of us who have not, I would ask that we pray and thank and be grateful of what they did for humanity and save what they could.
Yeah, thank you so much for that story. That was so powerful. I don't even know what to add. I'll just make this observation that the current work you're doing with regards to interfaith harmony, I would say, is a continuation, if not a tribute, to not just the partition history that your family went through, but as you mentioned, your family worked with Baba Farid. Um, and I think that's we in the subcontinental history, we seem to forget how such interfaith harmony used to exist, especially at the highest levels. For example, it's very the first time I went to an urs, a local peer's urs, I think it was either Data Ganjbaksh or Peer Hanjarwal, and I saw six there. I saw some Hindus there as well, and that's when I first learned that these who we think of as these Muslim leaders or Muslim saints were not just Muslim saints. They were lionized by people of all faiths, and so much so that 600 years or 700 years after their deaths, despite the partition, despite all the state narratives and all the collective memories that we've gone through, all the pain of partition, it's still so ingrained in oral histories and family histories that 700 years later, people still revere these saints, be they Sikh, Hindu, Muslim, and as it's like a local memory that despite all the propaganda, it's unable to be erased. And as
Absolutely.
you, yeah, I
Well,
think that's very beautiful. It's
you know,
something we
I mean,
completely missed.
one example that blew me away, okay, when I went to Lahore, in this particular case you're talking about, is going to the grave and the shrine of Shah Hussain. I had no idea of his background till it's all on the internet. But till you go there, it doesn't hit you in the face. Here was a Sufi saint of Lahore, Shah Hussain, who fell in love then with a Hindu boy and he changed his name to Madulal Hussain. And today in Lahore, as brother you know, where Mila Chiraga is held, the graves of Shah Hussain and Madhulal are next to each other, right? I have always wanted to go to Mela Chiraga. And guess what? This year I did. Oh my God. Means I could never imagine such a wonderful celebration. And there are other people who now take inspiration from Madhulal. I have a dear friend, Abuzar. You might know him. He is an artist. He's changed his name to Abuzar Madhu. Taking this inspiration, the important point for us to remember is that before the British came, a lot of us didn't have singular religious identities. The British forced South Indians, including Punjabis, to say you can only fit in one box. If you're going to be the Hindu box, you can't be in the Sikh or the Muslim or the Christian box. And this formation of religious identities and making them more rigid exploded when the partition came. But I agree with you that the religious boundaries were a lot more fluid, and there were family connections across. You see Sikh families in Punjab chiefs who have Sikh, Hindu, and Muslim names, and one brother and some Christians that also were there. One thing that I just want to pick up, Azeem, if we have time, is something that I found out in Pakistan when I went that I had no idea, and I don't think a lot of people know that. And that is that a lot of us in Charda Punjab and Sikhs who live outside of India, we view that any person who converted to the Sikh faith, who still is in Pakistan, or anybody who at partition was Sikh and became a Muslim, only did it in 1947. I had that perspective too. When I got there were so many of my friends who were Jats. They were Bajwa. I'm talking about Virk, Chattha, Sandhu, Tillo. After I got to know them very well, they would pull me aside and say, Tarunjit, there's something I want to talk with you about. And I knew exactly after some time what they want to talk about. They said that our ancestors converted from the Sikh faith to Islam. And the first thing I assumed was happened in partition. And the answer was, when I asked them, so what generation? They say this is at least 4 or 5 generations back. So my dada said that his pradada became a Muslim. So there is, so when I've talked about why Punjabi Jat Muslims, when they meet the Sikh community, there is a melting of the heart that happens in them because they are meeting someone that reminds them of their own ancestry and where they came from. And I've done some more research, Azeem, and what happened is that after the British occupation of Punjab in 1849, there around 1860s or so, this phenomenon began where there were Sikhs who started to convert. The upper caste Sikhs, it seems, began to convert to Muslims, and the lower caste converted to Christianity. This seemed to have continued till about 1920s, because by the early 1920s there was enough friction between the Muslim and the Sikh political parties. So I don't think this conversion continued beyond that, but that is still a link that puts, Muslims and Sikhs together. And so what we, brother, have to do is look to pathways forward. We all respect our ancestors, but I will make a confession with all of you publicly. While we respect our ancestors, what our grandparents' generation did to Punjab is horrific. They stained the heart of the five rivers with blood. I agree, the British contributed towards that. But Azeem, brother, tell me who butchered trains on both sides? I went to Jassar railway station where a Sikh train Gul Sahib was butchered. I also went to Mughalpura in Lahore where the butchered trains used to come. And I still remember going there with Fazan Naqvi. It was very difficult. I would almost hear those trains rolling in from Amritsar. And it was a Mughalpura railway station, which is empty today, at which the dead were separated from the living. The dead bodies were sent to the railway station in Lahore, and the living were sent to a refugee camp. So you can imagine that these memories don't go away. But what do we do as a generation today? What we have to do is wash those bloodstains of our ancestors. First, we have to own this up, that in our DNA, there is the capacity of immense love and immense genocide. Our ancestors have done that. So we take a collective ownership. Okay? Who raped the woman on both sides? Our ancestors' generation did. It's a heavy balance. It's a heavy weight that we have on our shoulders and our minds. And the way we wash the heart of Punjab and wash the bloodstains is through interaction that we are having today, for example, brother. You and me talking with each other, learning each other's language. Before partition, the common language Punjabi speak both knew Gurmukhi and Shahmukhi. We now need to learn each other's language. When I came back from Pakistan, I learned Shahmukhi. Now I teach people online with Jeeve Sanja Punjab. I teach Shahmukhi. So there are ways we can now heal the soul of Punjab. And that, I think, is the responsibility of our generation that we need to do. There is something in particular I have noted, both in India and Pakistan, that there does exist what I call a patriotism of hate. That to be a patriotic Indian, you have to hate the enemy Pakistan, and to be a patriotic Pakistani, you have to hate the enemy India. This patriotism of hate absolutely has to go. I don't think there's time and space. There are others, Azeem Bhai, who tell me that this border should be dissolved. And I actually tell them that I think that's very foolish. Now, Azeem Bhai, if you come back, behind you is a wall, right? If I say, Azeem Bhai, why don't you and me push this wall? So we keep, only two, you and me keep pushing this wall and it will make it fall. Isn't that foolish and naive? Absolutely. What has happened, brother, is the physical line between in Punjab does not bother me. What is bothering me is the line that we have drawn in our hearts, that people on the other side are bad and they are our enemies. Between your home and your neighbor's home, there is a wall, right? But it's not a wall of enmity. It's a wall of friendship. when you, your wife, or your mom make something, a dish, kheer, for example, right? They say, Kibi, please go and give it to the neighbor. If something happens to your neighbor, it impacts you. So, what we need to do is we need to transform this line in our heart, which is the line of otherness or of enmity, into a line of friendship. And then this physical line will not matter anymore. In fact, look at social media. What has social media done? Social media is making this physical line irrelevant. I remember when I went, and I'll stop after this last example, when I went to Kartarpur Sahib. I was, after I had langar and everything, I was sitting there. There were a bunch of, I would say these were students probably in seventh or eighth grade, and they were running around the complex wearing the school uniform. So, being a naive teacher, I thought good of it, and I asked them, I said, so tell me, are you on a school trip here? And they started giggling. So by that time, I knew they were cutting their class. So they were not here for a school trip. They had run away from school. So I said, why have you come to a Gurdwara? I thought you would go and watch a movie, you would go and do something. Why are you at a Gurdwara here in Kartarpur Sahib? So one of the kids finally got some courage and he came up to me and he said, first of all, there is free food here at the langar. I said, that's fair enough. But I said, what else? So one other guy came up and said, Uncle Ji, I want to tell you something that other will not say. But the second reason we are here, and obviously they speak Punjabi, is that there are children who come from the other side. What we do is we share our WhatsApp number, our Facebook, and our Twitter. And after we go back, we continue talking with each other. That is what gives me hope. That is what we need to amplify, is the love and mutual respect of the next generation that we have. And I think that's what we need to inspire. And that is how we wash the bloodstains of our ancestors from the soul of Punjab.
Yes, some beautiful points you made there, and I would just like to make a few observations. Like you said, it's very imperative that we we think of the partition as an interruption of interfaith harmony. Like you mentioned, your family, they used to work with Muslim leaders like Baba Farid, etc. I'll give you an example of my own family's oral history. So we used to be in the Bastis of Jalandhar,
Ah,
and yeah, yes, and so my there's a story that Guru Gobind Singh, he was on the run from, I think, yes, it was Aurangzeb. And so he was around Sirhind or something. He came to Jalandhar, and one of our ancestors, Sheikh Darwesh, he was also a religious leader. Sheikh Darwesh gave him refuge. And the story that our family tells us is that um, at that time the Sikhs used to have they used to have shaved heads, and the sartorial look wasn't the same as it is now. So but the Pashtuns, they had long hair, they had that choga, that big red choga, that gown, and they had the long beard. So to make him blend in and with the Pashtuns, he also elongated his hair, his beard, and they were once parading him outside. The guards stopped him. They said, "Who is this person?" They said, "He's just a prince of our family, etc., etc." So Guru Gobind Singh, after that, our family story goes like this: that after that, this he adopted the 5 Ks, I think, as well, and the Sikh dress up became long hair, and the beard. So basically, our family went against the Muslim emperor, and like you mentioned before, of Virk Saab giving refuge to your family at the cost of his own safety. I think this was very common, like you said, for hundreds and hundreds of years. The partition was an interregnum, it was an interruption. Doesn't mean that is what it always was and what it always will be. And just lastly, sorry, your own experience in Lahore. Like, as you say, अगर bus चलता, they would have मोटो पे आपको चढ़ा लेते. I mean, there's the collective hate of India in the media, and people will, like, those same people might politically be like, no, we can't be with Indians. But when they experience you, when they interact with you, it's completely different.
Yes, and brother, I have made one particular notice that people in Pakistan, I noted, especially in Charda, Punjab, may or may not like the Indian government, but they do like people from India. So they make a distinction between the government and the people. When I go to Charda, Punjab, which I also go every year, I don't see that distinction. A lot of people can't make a distinction between the Pakistani government and the Pakistani people. They look at them as being the same. So there is room for growth, for all of us. And I will close with something that I think is very relevant today. I remember meeting an old Baba in Lahore. And the things at that time, Trump was the president here in the United States. I'm a US citizen. So we were talking about religious nationalism, in the United States, Pakistan, India, South Asia in general. And this Baba, said something amazing. He was probably 80, 85 years old. He said, I would strongly recommend that the United States and India not go down the path of, and the word he used was, if I remember, mazhab da kattadwa, which means extremism of religion, religious extremism. He said, I hope they don't go down the path that Pakistan went through during Ziaul Haq's time, and then ultimately it ended. I said, when did it end? Remind me. He says, don't you remember the day and the time when the school was bombed in Peshawar? He says, that is the day when Pakistan realized, where does religious nationalism take one? So his point was that let not India and the United States make the same mistake as Pakistan. Learn from our lesson and don't repeat that mistake, was where the road takes you. At the end, we have already been there, he said. We have measured that road. So learn from our experience rather than repeating that same mistake. So we as South Asians have much to learn from each other rather than repeating the same mistakes of the past.
Definitely. And before I asked you about your work, your professional work in committees, I want to ask you another of your experiences. You wrote about um, the mighty Indus. You went to Attak. I've been there as well. That beautiful railway station perched
Yes.
on top of the hill, and with the river Indus. And because the word India also comes from the word Indus, right? And the Indus River is the source of the South Asian continent. So, would you please briefly tell us about your
Sure.
experience in Attak?
Indus is interesting because physically and emotionally, Punjab ends at Indus, right? Physically and emotionally, Punjab ends at Indus. So going there for the first time, at Atak Khurd, oh my God, the train actually went through when I saw it. And then right by the bridge, those of you who've been there is an old steel bridge. My friend Jahandad Khan, he and my ancestors had several wars with each other in the 1820s to late 1830s. His servant had made sarson ka saag and makki ki roti, which is typical Punjabi food, and we sat and ate at the place where we knew that our ancestors had fought with each other. But that day we fought over makki ki roti, saag, and lassi. And in the end, we now consider ourselves to be very good friends. And so, this is a way in which we can transform the enmity of the past into friendship of today and the future. So, thank you for asking that.
Yes,
Looks
and the
looks like
thing
you
about
looks like you've googled me quite a bit. So,
no, I read some of your work. It was, I mean, I told you I was lost in it because, of course, I'm from Lahore and I've been to all these places. You also mentioned Taxila and the north as well. There's so much. Like the tragedy with our part of the world here is we've kind of um, we've consigned to history, not even history, but we've just ignored the non-Muslim history of Pakistan, which from the Buddhist, the Gandhara civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, the Hindu Shahi age, and all these areas, they have so much history. And what you see is there's a shrine, then next to it is a temple, and you can just going through these areas, you can see the interfaith harmony. And I'm not romanticizing it and saying it's perfect, but like any other arrangement, there is there is an interfaith harmony that used to exist, and there are physical reminders of it. If you go through any part of Pakistan, you see all of that.
Brother, one of the media, when I said when the book was being released, asked me what I think it was a politically charged question. And when that happens, I kind of know what I want to answer. The question was, what do you think about religious freedom in India and Pakistan? And of course, I'm not. I love both countries. One sustained my ancestors, another where I lived for a long time and sustained me. I said, look, in my opinion, India has more religious freedom than Pakistan. Pakistan, in my opinion, has less religious freedom. However, India is on a downward trajectory with religious nationalism and Hindutva, okay, especially under Modi. On the other hand, Pakistan is trying to give more religious freedom. So, yes, India is more religious for minorities than Pakistan, but the trajectories are in the opposite direction. And I firmly believe, means I have friends who couldn't believe that I had gone to a mandir in Anarkali in which Hindus still come today and worship. Many people in Charda Punjab can't even believe that there can be a functioning mandir, and Azeem, it is right by the Park Tea House. If you go by the Park Tea, this next gully on the left, so you can tell how much Chaman ice cream has been my most favorite thing. Every time I go there at night, if I can go to Chaman ice cream, there is nothing better than that. And I look forward to seeing you sometime when I come, so we can go to some of these places together.
Yes, Doctor, I would love to take you on a tour of Lahore and all these places, especially central Punjab, the Color Kahar areas, uh, yeah, near Islamabad and those areas. They had so much Sikh and Hindu history as well. And thank you so much. We could go on. We have another speaker next. We could go on for hours and hours listening to your wonderful stories. And thank you so much for the work you do. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, we can see you again, and definitely I will go buy your book as soon as I'm done here.
It is available at Sunday Meal Bookshop in Lahore. And when I'm next time in Lahore, we'll spend a couple of days together. I also want to know more about your family story and history. And I want to thank the 1947 Partition Archive of putting this wonderful time together. The closing story I will share is I had a chance to visit the National History Museum of Pakistan, which is right opposite, as you know, the Lahore Fort. And oh my God, what a repository they have of partition. Amazing. The most touching to me was that they have a 3D reality movie in which you sit in an actual bogie that transferred passengers from India to Pakistan. And it is a story of a young girl who is escaping with her parents from Charda, Punjab, and they get killed, and how she comes over to Landa, Punjab. I couldn't hold my tears. So there are things we need to do to change people's hearts and minds. And the way to do that is through storytelling. And that is what the 1947 Partition Archive does best. So thank you, Azeem, for your, I know you volunteer and work with them for a long time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and definitely hope to see you again. And for those who are joining us, please be online to hear our last speaker of the evening, Ehsan Khan. He will explore the timeline of the partition in August 1947. We're coming online in a few seconds. Please keep watching. Welcome back, everyone. I'll start with a brief introduction for our speaker. Mr. Ehsan Khan has done his MSc in Media and Communication Studies from the University of Punjab, Lahore in 2019. His major area of research was the role of press in the public opinion formation. Currently, he is pursuing his MPhil in history, and his major area of research is Indian press and the partition of Punjab, a case study of civil and military gazette. Welcome, Ehsan. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Azeem. I would like to congratulate everybody from Pakistan and India upon the independence anniversary. And if I recall the words of Jawaharlal Nehru, he once said that India awoke to life and freedom. So does Pakistan. And let me just indulge in now our the topic which we are going to actually pursue here. Can we
Okay.
see?
Just a
Can we
second.
see?
Let me just brief the audience. Ehsan will show us a timeline of partition in August 1947, and he shows news clippings from August 1947. He's prepared a PowerPoint for us. Let's get straight into it. Please show us your PowerPoint, Ehsan. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
okay.
We can see it now.
So this is actually from August 1st, 1947. So since we are actually going ahead with the timeline, it is from Civil and Military Gazette of 1st August 47. It says that powers vested in Union President and absolute right to grant and pardon. So this is actually basically telling us about the deadline which was actually announced. It to be midnight August 14 to be the date where both dominions were actually given the status of independence. So here actually they are actually portraying this news here. On my right side of the screen, if we see that Hindus and Sikhs urged to boycott August 15 celebrations. Now this is very interesting. Why? Because Hindus and Sikhs actually up some portion of those they were actually against the division, calling it a nationalhood or what we call nationalists. So they actually did not want to separate the Akhand vision of India. So this is actually they are saying that rather than enjoying and rather than having your all celebrations, we should actually spend time in repenting for our sins and in repenting for the forgiveness for whatever we have done or whatever we shouldn't have done. Okay, so let us go to the next slide. This is from a newspaper of local Lahore newspaper, namely Inqilab Akhbar. It was by Maulana Ghulam Rasul Meher and Abdul Majid Salik. It says the same thing actually, more or less, that Hindu or Sikh 15 अगस्त की तकरीबों का मुकम्मल बाइकआउट करेंगे. The same thing, the same news which was actually said before. But here actually there is another narrative that actually Congress shouldn't have accepted the partition plan itself because it was against the mode, the actually vision of the nationalist movement. So this actually newspaper adds a bit more percentage to the earlier news. Going to the next slide, this is from the same date. India's Day of Independence draws nearer. Constituent Assembly not likely to take over legislative functions. Yeah. Now, because since the days were actually drawing nearer, so it was decided to devise the Constituent Assembly of both countries. But the newspaper actually says that although the Constituent Assemblies are functional, but they are not given the whole power till October. What they will be doing actually, they will be actually focusing on devising their framework for their future. And above this news item, we can see some leaders, Indian leaders in a conference, Baldev Singh and some others as well. On the right side, there is a bloodshed in NWFP which is actually portraying about the martial law status may be declared in Peshawar. Everybody knows that while we were actually on the verge of partition, so there were actually quite movements against these all concepts of partition itself. So there was many chaos, there were several other things. So this is actually portraying about that the status of law and order situation in Peshawar city of NWFP, Northern Western Frontier Provinces of Punjab. On my right side of this news item, Punjab partition case. Now this is about the same what we have been reading, the Radcliffe Award, what we call. So he had been actually indulged with the leaders from both parties that how to proceed with the partition itself. So this is actually projecting that the leaders are actually enjoying themselves and have several conferences. So now actually the whole committee will be moving towards Shimla to finalize some other perspective and they will be staying there by August 7th. Now, there is a caricature we found in Civil and Military Gazette of August 1st. I mean, it says that Travancore state joins India. And this is actually stating that how he joins, actually, it is giving a kind of what we call the marital ceremony or kind of this. I mean, like how cartoons work. So they're actually telling about the bondage the state is going to have been united with the India. Again, Urdu Akhbar of Inqilab newspaper. This is the same news which we have actually read before, the martial law in Peshawar. So this the newspaper adds a few details, which is actually that Mr. Jinnah actually wants to disarm the what we call Surkhposh or those or Zalme Pakhtun. So who were actually armed people in the NWFP province. So by we were actually drawing nearer to the partition, so actually Jinnah wanted to de-arm them before we actually fall into the division itself. The next slide actually says that Hyderabad to accede to Indian dominion. Another state, another status of union with the India. So yeah, there is a draft instrument and resolutions, how they are accepted and how they are actually offered to have their unification with India. On my right side, there are again the news from 2nd August 1947 about the Lahore violence. There had been 8 cases of arms and there were some firing, there were some bomb blasts. And the newspaper actually says that in this day, Lahore was at violence, but Amritsar was at peace. Because these both countries, these both cities having a slighter distance between them actually faced too much violence from either sides. So, on my next slide is from the Punjab University at Amritsar. Now, this is very interesting. I mean, people were actually quite concerned that since we are drawing nearer to the partition, so what will happen to the university status of ours, and what will be the status of Punjab University since it is in Lahore? So, how we are going to proceed with another university? So, they are going actually a plan of some Khalsa colleges at University of in Amritsar, and this is actually editorial. So somebody is actually giving an opinion in letters to the editor to Civil and Military Gazette. On my right side is the UP Hindu Sabha threat. So this is actually about the same nationalist movements. They were actually not in the favor of this division. I mean, the concept of Akhand. So they are actually threatening in some or other way. And the other news item is that not converted to Pathanistan. Now, Pir Sahib of Manki Sharif, this is a place in NWFP. There has been a misconception spread all over the press, I mean, other than the Muslim press, that this Pir actually has favored for Pathanistan. That means that the province of NWFP shall fall in another country, namely Pathanistan, and so on. There were many other narratives. Congress has the same narrative to some extent. So this news actually saying, Civil and Military Gazette, that no, he has actually denied this, and Sardar Abdul Qayyum, who was actually the leader there, he went to Pir Sahib Manki and inquired about whether he has given this statement or not. So he just denied that no, I have not given any such statement. So yeah, this is actually a denial of that statement. Now, if I proceed on my right side, uh, on my left side, let's just discuss August 15 and 16th. They were actually declared the public holidays for India in the commemoration of the partition. On my right side, I mean, this is a very interesting caricature cartoon. I mean, in center there is actually a British personnel, might be Mountbatten himself. So this is actually they are cages. So either side is Jinnah and the other side is Gandhi. So he's actually dividing people on either cage, and the cages are actually interlinked with each other. So the statement underline is actually saying that the both status, the both dominions actually has no other option other than to be neighbors of each other. So this is very interesting. item from civil and
Just
military gazette.
Hasn't just one question, Hassan.
Yeah, please.
About could you please go to the previous slide? So, what I find very interesting is they're calling it the Dominion of India when it actually wasn't. So, what's the reason? Do you know? Do you have any clue about that?
Pardon me, please, can you repeat?
Yeah, why is it called Dominion of India here in this newspaper?
Actually, the line which says that you cannot run away from the Dominion government, which is your neighbor. Mhm. So this is actually they are saying Dominion of India. Actually, it was in more or less actually Dominion means the Greater India, and it was actually being divided into two separate entities. So this is actually it turns out to be. It was a declaration by Mountbatten himself. Okay, so on the next slide, actually, it's from Seth Dalmia to Mr. Jinnah. And what actually he says actually, it was some kind of a religious, offer from him that certain kinds of the rituals, which the practices which Hindus have been performing, so Mr. Jinnah should actually, give them support. And this is a huge news item about this. And in the center column, this is actually the letters to editors. There is a heading of proposal. It was actually a proposal that let's call Karachi, Kolkata, Amritsar, Lahore, and individual cities themselves. They should not join with any other city. Let Amritsar join with Lahore so that it can expand its area and influence, and let them have their communication with Karachi and Kolkata. So this was actually letters to editor, which is quite interesting. People were actually having this observation, the public opinion, but we call actually. On my right side is 30,000 more British troops to leave India. Very interesting that since the partition was drawing nearer, so the troops themselves were actually having a withdrawal. So the whole proposal was being actually presented in the cabinet of UK Parliament. So it was decided to actually vacate these 30,000 and more troops in the upcoming days. Now, coming to the next slide, this is a very renowned newspaper of India. It was called Paisa Akhbar. It was earlier published from Gujranwala, then it came to Lahore. Munshi Mehboob Alam was its editor. So he has actually portrayed some what we call editorials, namely Azadi or Etamad, or if we call that the independence with confidence. He says that, we were never ever expecting the Britain to leave us in such hurry. We were least expecting that they would leave us totally. So since they are leaving, they are not actually, putting something on us or what we call a favor. It was actually evident because they faced a huge monetary loss in their World War II. So there was no other option left for them or just to leave these countries in order to save their own country. And on my left side, it is actually about Hindustan Taksim ke baad. So they are actually saying that although Muslims and Hindus are actually getting separated, so a large portion of people might not be able to migrate, but yet there will be some people who will be migrating, and they will be migrating on the basis of either they will be wanting some trade on either sides of the border, or they will be having some problems. But let me just say that the things, the history did not unfold that way how this editor perceived, and the upcoming whole month actually proven that there was a huge mass migration faced in both regions of this area. Again, it portrays that Mulk mein Afsosnak, Abtari, Badamni, again the chaos, the disorder in the country, and it has actually stating all those narratives that how the people are actually suffering, the violence, the arson, the firing, the blast, etc. So again, the news is about the violence itself. Now going to the 4th August, Bihar communists urged to celebrate August 15. So Bihar, the people of Bihar communists actually, they were in the very much favor of celebrations. And definitely everybody is going to celebrate. So they were actually a step ahead. They were actually quite excited. So they were actually provoking others to just, prepare yourself. We have to actually celebrate these all celebrations. On my right side is a boundary commission in Shimla. There had been several, what we call uh, gatherings of boundary commission of Punjab and Bengal as well. So this was actually the statement that they are soon going to meet in Shimla, where they will be going to decide that how we are going to proceed with the plan. Now, the news is again from the Urdu newspaper of Lahore, Inqilab Akhbar. It says, now there is a statement of Mr. Jinnah. He says that लीग किसी रियासत से कोई बात जबरन मनवाना नहीं चाहती. It says that Muslim League is not in a favor of forcing any individual state to join Pakistan. It is up to them whether they want to join or not. Muslim League is not going to force anybody. So yeah, this was actually a narrative which was portrayed here. On the right side of the border, it is said that boundary commissions, I mean, proceeding was held in Punjab, and Sir Zafrullah Khan who was actually, from here, who was presenting the Muslims. So he has actually had a quite debate about this. He was actually representing Bahawalpur state. So he actually portrayed whatever what we call the narrative of Muslims about partition. So yeah, it was actually mentioned here about Zafrullah Khan. This was actually a boundary commission itself. It's from times of India. So this is, in center, it's Radcliffe and some other actually the leaders who were actually involved. If I just call the members of Punjab Boundary Commission after concluding their discussions at Shimla, from left to right are Mr. Justice Muhammad Munir, Mr. Justice Dean Muhammad, Sir Cyril Radcliffe, Sir Justice Meherchand Mahajan, and Mr. Justice Teja Singh. So yeah, this is actually about the Boundary Commission itself. Now, this is again the news about the Gandhi actually was traveling to Kashmir. So this was actually a picture of him standing in the door of a rail car, or what we call train. So he was actually going. On my right side, the UP government action against Hindu Mahasabha leaders. There was actually a conflict between them. Again, the nationalist movements were against the partition themselves, and there was some other narrative itself. On the bottom right corner, future of Indian Christians in India, a very interesting news. But we were actually just listening that it was actually giving the rights to the minorities free to occupy a higher position in the dominion. So yeah, Military Gazette is actually endorsing the statement that the Christians have been vowed, they have been actually approached that they are quite safer and they will be able to gain these, seats if they are capable of this. The next slide is actually the union of 6 states. Akali Dal, a very renowned movement, it was moved to prepare scheme. Now, what was the scheme actually? Their scheme was actually unite all the 6 and declare their own separate entity. So this was actually their scheme. They are actually preparing just what we call 10 days before the partition was executed itself. And in the center, there was some procession about the Gandhi to just go back. There was a demonstration. There had been so many demonstrations. On the right side, to a greater interest of mine, I mean, people were actually falling into the, what we call partition itself. Here, the news item is about the Lady Mountbatten is going to perform the opening ceremony of Anti-Malarial Institute. Now, this is a very interesting thing. People were actually all indulged in the partition itself, but since, the Lady Mountbatten and the Britain themselves, they have a hobby of this humankind and all this, what we call, so they were actually, focusing on this as well. There was another newspaper actually who actually portrayed the same news as well. So we can see, some other leaders with her, and joined by, what we call Pandit Nehru, Mrs. Pandit, and Mr. Ghazanfar Ali Khan. So yeah, they were actually going to inaugurate something. Now we are again to the Pesach bar. There is another news from Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan of Pakistan. He says that I have an appeal for everybody that since we are drawing nearer to our partition, now let us forget our past and let's be, I mean, friendly towards each other since we are soon going to have our freedom. So a good gesture from, I mean, the person, I mean, saying that let's forget everything and let's unify and achieve the same goal. On my left side, again, there is that the all the conferences about the partition actually have been concluded, and there will be some result in the upcoming weeks. So next slide is about Christian urge to hold Thanksgiving. Now this is very interesting. Christians were at the forefront. They were enjoying. They were actually wanted to give a Thanksgiving ceremony because they were all actually having this what we call partition. They were actually getting a liberation from all this. So they were actually having trying to have this what we call the Thanksgiving ceremony, and they wanted to have this. So on in the center, we see that no date for withdrawal of British troops. So yeah, there was actually some earlier we saw that 30,000 troops will be leaving. Now they were actually confusing, and the date was actually extended. On my right side, a statement from a Hindu leader that we now start on great voyage of independence. Again, a message of positivity, a message of great, I mean, what we call confidence that yes, we are actually heading towards this. So this is a great voyage indeed. Again, the news we have actually seen behind uh, about the statement of Peer of Monkey Sharif that no, I'm not in the favor of Pathanistan. On my right side, this is actually a caricature of Military Gazette because soon after the results of the elections, I mean, it was meant that the Dr. Khan should resign, but he did not resign actually. So the person is saying, the Military Gazette, that according to his commitment, he should resign. And the caricature actually says that the Dr. Saab is actually, I mean, hiding his head underneath something. Again, there comes the news about India and Pakistan Governor Generals. The king approves the appointment of Mountbatten and Jinnah. So yeah, they were both actually Governor Generals of either sides. So the things were actually unfolded in that way, and they had actually a remarkable way onwards. On the center, we again face the violence news: 18 people killed and 14 injured in Jalandhar district. So yeah, whenever you face any news, there are always a news about violence because there was extreme violence during that time. The next slide is about a lead for the Sikhs. It is actually another editorial about telling Sikhs to join either sides, or if you want to join the Pakistan side, you will be having certain benefits. If you're going towards the other side, you will be having these benefits. So they are actually a opinion of somebody who has actually wrote these letters to editor. In the center, Congress trying to crush Mahasabha. I mean, why this was? Because I have just again explained previously, there was a conflict of between attaining the motive, either you are accepting the partition itself or not. So there were actually two narratives about this. On my right side, devise own ways of celebration. Liaquat Ali Khan actually says everybody that, I mean, yes, people do ask him. He actually says that people write to me that how we are going to celebrate. So he tells them celebrate in any kind you want, in any way you want, but remain peaceful. Whatever means you have, just celebrate your independence. So another good message from either side. Now again, a good news which was actually published in the Urdu newspaper. Pakistan ka Lahore radio station 14 August ko chalu ho jayega. The radio station, the Pakistan radio station will be working from 14th August. So yeah, we actually saw this that it's actually unfolded in this way. And again, the news other is that 15th August will be the commemoration of the Independence Day of Pakistan. The program will be actually uh, what we call telecasted. On the right side is the news about that the Baldev Singh has become the governor of Bombay. So yeah, he was actually made the governor of Bombay. So the cabinet actually approves that. On the lower side, the bottom, Maghribi Bengal mein aqliyatun ki hifazat ka yakeen. I mean, this was actually a statement from Muslim League that the people residing in Bengal, they should be given, I mean, they should be given some protection. and they should be given some assurity of safety. The same was actually version of some Indians about the people living in Sindh, the Hindus, that they should also be giving some protection, some what we call safety. So yeah, there are the news actually about this. Again, the commandment, the military commanders were actually made of either side, Pakistan and Hindustan. So again, this is a news about the commandment published in the Urdu newspaper of this. Now we are very much closer to the 14th August itself. On 14th August, the Civil Military Gazette gave the news of kill on the front, what we call the face of newspaper. The killings continue in Lahore. There was no news about the partition. 22 dead, 25 injured, and the violence itself. And so the main newspaper actually was focusing on the violence itself. On my right side, the statement from, we are neither Hindus nor Muslim. Our religion is a personal matter, Liaquat Ali Khan. Again, a statement that the religion should be the personal matter. There is nobody to interfere in the religion of anybody. On the next slide, there's a news which says that, let me just say what it is. लूटा हुआ माल नकद मवेशी और औरतें वापस कर दी जाएंगी. It says that we will be returning any asset, any wealth, any property, any cash, any animal or what we call cattle or women or girls we might have during all this, migration. So this is actually a news about two areas, Godgaon and Mithra. They both what we call nowadays MOU was discussed that we will be actually returning all these things from either sides if we get approach of any of this. A very interesting actually what we call headline by the Urdu newspaper itself.
As in just one more thing, I think we should also mention the sub headline. आइंदा भाई भाई की तरह जिंदगी बसर करेंगे.
Exactly. I just missed it. Yeah, we will be
It's very
actually
very interesting.
the relation will be quite brotherly between us. There will be no more fight amongst us. So yeah, this is actually what the newspaper says. Very interesting news item actually when we fall in these all details. Now this is a statement from Jenkins, the governor of Punjab. This is after the partition. The two Punjabs may they flourish. A very goodwill message from Jenkins, and I may say that it was actually a great gesture of him that he actually given a message of for the state he has actually ruled. And yeah, this was actually published in Civil and Military Gazette. I just mentioned in the beginning, why we actually are celebrating 15th or 14th August. Why it was chosen to be 12th midnight. So the news item of Urdu newspaper says that 15 August ka muhurat theek nahi. The what we call the signs of or what we I cannot actually getting the right words or what we call. Azeem, if you can help me in translating this. Okay, this was actually a foretelling by some foretellers that the 15th August would not be a good day of partition. So let us just keep it in between 14th and 15th. So this was might be the reason why at 12 midnight the announcement was made. This is actually what this newspaper is saying. And newspaper is actually also saying that this foreteller is very right because he has already made a prediction about Shimla conference that it won't be successful. And it was like he foretold. So this time, if he's foretelling that 15th August won't be fruitful, so we must be following it. So this was actually maybe the reason why we actually faced the news itself. Now, the 15th August has come, the partition, the division, the independence of both countries. Now, practically, why we are actually, more majorly we actually focus on civil and military gazette. Let me just tell that an interesting article by what we call this newspaper. He has actually says that, their newspaper actually tells about the whole journey of partition, starting from the birth of Congress, from the birth of Muslim League, the Civil and Military Gazette has been an ally of this whole journey with the Muslims and Hindus till the date they are getting parted. They are facing partition. So the newspaper is giving credit to him itself that Civil and Military Gazette was 5 years old when these all things were happened. It was its 13th birthday when Congress came into being, and it was a major mature when Muslim League were formed. So it just goes on that yes, today Civil and Military Gazette actually is facing and very happy that both nations are actually heading towards this partition, what we call freedom. A very interesting article endorsing its own efforts, like every press do. On my left side, then the pictures of Liaquat Ali Khan, then Mr. Jinnah, then downside Mountbatten, then Nehru, and lastly Mr. Gandhi. Next, again, the news about is about fulfillment of a great deal, a message by Jinnah that a goodwill of friendship between Britain and India. I'm hoping for a greater future. We will be having some MOUs or whatever. On my right side, new era souvenir, the making of two dominions. A whole article actually was published, endorsement was given, and the whole journey was actually recalled in this editorial of Civil and Military Gazette. And I am actually unable due to time constraint not to include, but in the upcoming days, Civil and Military Gazette actually published a whole what we call supplement about this partition itself. So maybe my other colleagues might be focusing on these all details in some next sessions. And lastly, we see the news of Times of India, the birth of India's freedom. So yeah, nation wakes to new life. Mr. Nehru calls for a big effort from people. Striving task of future. So everybody actually is having a hope, having a courage, or expecting a very fruitful life ahead. And in the center, there are news about the state visit of Karachi. Mountbatten actually had to first visit Karachi, and then he rushed towards back to Delhi to commemorate, to celebrate the 15th August with the Indians. So yeah, this was the whole journey of what we actually covered from 1st August to 15th of August. Thank you, Azeem.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ehsan. That was such a fascinating insight into the timeline of the partition and how people were responding to it. And I think just to briefly comment on something, um, I, it seems like around the third, fourth, and fifth, there was mass confusion. No one knew what was going on. People didn't know what to do, what was happening. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, the biggest disaster, what we call actually, the partition plan was not disclosed earlier. So people were actually having quite confusion. They were actually not sure whether they have to leave a Muslim area or whether they have to leave a Hindu area or go towards the other one. So since the partition was announced around 17th, so those who were actually failed to migrate, they actually then faced this huge massacre. So the confusion was still there. The leaders were clear, but the people were actually not clear, so much clear. But yeah, it was actually how it unfolded to be.
And even the newspaper was calling it the Dominion of India when it clearly wasn't, right? Like Canada is a dominion, but India, Pakistan were independent countries. But even the newspaper professional journalists, there seems to be a lot of confusion regarding, and a lack of consensus as well. Like all the letters to the editor that you showed us, there was no consensus on who should go where. I found it very interesting the city proposal you mentioned that Amritsar and Lahore should be one cities and Karachi. As the previous speaker said, there was not this pure religious identity. People sometimes identified more with the areas, and um, I think that's
Yeah,
related to
actually,
that.
every newspaper has a policy. I mean, every newspaper has a tilt actually. So the Muslim newspaper actually were focusing on the Muslim narrative. Majorly, actually, the major source of all these newspapers were Civil and Military Gazette because it was well established. So whenever you go to read all these more or less the newspaper actually says that we are getting this news from Civil and Military Gazette. The other source is API, Associated Press of India. So this is what actually these were the sources, and API is the source of every newspaper. So whatever we are actually getting, this is actually the source, but they were actually getting this. Other than, I mean, there may be a chance that they have a special representative to some extent, but majorly they were getting news from API news agency.
Yeah, that's. And thank you so much for this wonderful trip back down memory lane and showing us these primary sources so we could see through our own eyes how people at that time, or a section of people at that time, as evidenced by the newspapers, um, felt about partition and how they were processing partition in real time. Um,
Yeah, thank
yeah,
you.
and thank you so much, Ehsan, for joining us, and to the audience, thank you so much for joining us in this very long conversation. We will be back tomorrow again to commemorate 75 years of partition with author Rajiv Shukla, Nisid Hajari, and Debanjan Das. Thank you. Good night.